Hello to everyone. Thanks for being here today. Right now at the Missouri Historical Society, we say a lot. We're here to introduce you to a St. Louis that you haven't met, and I love that I get to introduce you to this tunnel because I have been secretly telling everybody, or not even secretly, I've been gushing about this tunnel for years, and today I get to make it public. So you're going to get to hear about it, and then hopefully when I'm done talking today, you'll have lots of questions, and I'll be able to answer them, but also maybe you'll have questions I won't be able to answer, which means more things to go read and learn about, which is always good with me. Let's talk about Eads, and hopefully you've been to the exhibit outside. We'll be wrapping up later this summer, right? Early fall, we'll be wrapping that, so you've still got a little bit of time to see it if you haven't seen it yet. Underground ingenuity, the Eads Bridge Tunnel. So we have to start here. I'm not going to talk about the bridge very much. The bridge gets its day in the sun all the time. We're going to kind of set it aside. But we do have to talk about the fact that it got built, right? And the fact that it happened. So this is St. Louis, beautifully painted in a very curvy, stretched way. It's like it's done out of a weird camera. But here's St. Louis painted in 1859. So this is before the bridge. When this beautiful drawing was published, the issue of a bridge in St. Louis had been swirling in the collective thoughts, our collective conscious for quite a while. The first bridge plans were drawn up in the 1830s, but the guy that drew them, they did a study, he did these plans, they decided that it would cost about $700,000 at the time, which was a lot at the time, and there were no railroads to use it. So it was kind of like building it ahead of time. So they set the plan aside in the 1830s. And that was Charles Ellet that designed that first one. In the 1840s, still no railroads here. And there's about 16,000 people. But we know it's still there. And again, in that collective conscious, there are people raising the concern that we need a bridge, guys. Like we need this. And by the 1850s, things are serious. They hit a tipping point that finally people are paying attention. By the 1850s, Chicago is rapidly surpassing St. Louis, in economically, and a big part of that is because trains can now cross the country at Rock Island and Davenport, Iowa. They're bringing freight closer to Chicago, bringing things up, and so that's bringing money away from St. Louis and going north of here. So that's one of the things people are like, we need this is happening, this is pulling St. Louis behind, we need the bridge. Any attempt to get a bridge built here, though, in the 1850s, was also being tightly held back by the monopoly that was held on the riverfront by Wiggins Ferry Company, right? When I make my movie about the Eads Bridge, there will be organ music when Wiggins comes in. So Wiggins Ferry Company was very successful, and they didn't just have a monopoly on the ferries that were going across the river here, they had a monopoly on the rail yards. And then they had a subsidiary company on the Missouri side called Transfer Exchange, and that was controlling everything crisscrossing the company, or crisscrossing the river. Wiggins Ferry Company had legally, because they of course had paid money to get this moved through the legislature in Illinois, they owned 900 acres of the Illinois shoreline across from St. Louis. They handled all the freight, all the passengers, which was not a pleasant ride, but handled everything coming and going. All right, so that's their setup. That's the thing. We've got bridges being built elsewhere. There are lawsuits everywhere about bridges, and people are, the steamboat interest, or they do not want to let go of what's happening here, and we have this ferry situation here in St. Louis. There is a bridge company that gets organized here in 1855, and that is the St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company. Now, I challenge you on this talk today to try to keep them all straight, because they all have the same name, just slightly moved around. So in 1855, we have the St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company. They incorporate. They had a bridge designed in 1857. There were several different financial panics that happened throughout the 1850s. That pulls money away from here, and the rail lines that had made it to St. Louis financially failed. Also, during the Civil War, the rail lines in Missouri were destroyed in a lot of cases. So all of these things are happening. They come up with a bridge plan. It doesn't go through. In 1865, so 10 years later, St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company has kind of quietly dissolved in the background. The whole thing has kind of been set aside. In 1865, St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company is revived by a guy named Norman Cutter. And I promise you, all of this has to do with the tunnel. It's revised by Norman Cutter. And when he does that, the city listens, and they hire a man, last name of Truman Homer, so last name of Homer, and they hire him to create a study and to figure out, okay, we're getting serious, we need a tunnel, we don't need a tunnel, we need a bridge. What's going on here? And Homer writes this report, and he answers 4 questions, very important questions in his report. 1, do we need a bridge? He says, yes, the ferries are inadequate. More stuff can cross the river if we don't have this issue. 2, will it be profitable? He says, yes, as long as the ferries are gone. 3, what kind of bridge? 3-span rectangular on 4 piers, like the most basic, draw a rectangle across the river, put some piers, and he walks away from that question. 4, where should it go? This is where a tunnel starts to come in. Where should it go? Homer looks at the St. Louis riverfront and says, I think it should go right here, meaning, a little red thing here, I think it should go right here. I think it should go right into the middle of that city, because on the other side of the river is this. So this is looking over into Illinois. So he suggests the bridge go in to the city right here, but this is all Wiggins. Wiggins owns all of this, and Homer's anti-ferry. So he's picked this spot because if it goes in right here, it's got to go right into their stuff. Like it's going to tear apart their holdings. So this is where we get started. And also Homer drops a little nugget into that report where he says, I think you need this bridge, and you also need a depot for people to get off, like passengers to get off. That's going to come in later. All right, so we're directly across from Washington Avenue. We have this huge network of train lines and rail yards and stuff that's just pushed right up to the river. And they have all of this has to go through the legislature. It has to go through Congress at different levels. So they pass a legislative act saying, okay, Homer, we're with you. We see what you're saying here. We like this spot. We like this idea. And it's passed in Missouri, but not in Illinois. So that's a problem. Can't build it if you don't have the 2 things. So if a bridge gets built, it's not going to be built by the city of St. Louis, even if they did pay for a report. It's going to be built by a bridge company. And bridge companies are one of 2 things. One bridge company is a collection of guys or girls, a collection of people with money investing in the idea of the bridge, right? Like they're investing, the financing. They're going to make money off of this thing just existing. The other kind of bridge company is like Keystone Bridge Company, who actually makes a bridge. So even though we use the phrase bridge company, today I'm only talking about the big one, the conglomerate, the people with the money. So the bridge is not going to be built by the city. It's going to be built by a company. This is important because at this time we get the revived St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company. And it's working off of Homer's plan. It's going for that. And in 1865 is when Eads enters the game, right? He enters into this story in 1865. He heads up there is a committee that is formed by the Merchants Exchange. They put Eads in front of it. They get him because he's a good financer, and he's semi-retired at that time, but he's invested all over the place. So they're not even talking about his engineering yet. They're talking about the fact that he knows how to finance stuff and bring money together. So that's what brings him into this, is all of this organizing companies and just the idea of the bridge. So we have, 1865, Eads enters the story. He's part of this. He's part of the financing. That's why he's head of that effort for this and connected, not yet, to the St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company, but he's brought in by the city and brought in by Merchants Exchange to be ahead of it. This is also where a guy named Lucius Boomer enters into the story. So stage left, stage right. Boomer is a Chicago-based bridge builder, and he's interested in building a bridge here. He had built the Rock Island Bridge as well as the ill-fated Gasconade River Bridge. This is an issue because Eads does not trust Boomer for several reasons, and this kind of is getting simplified, but business interests in St. Louis, they do not trust someone from Chicago building a bridge here, because they're like, well, that money, he's obviously working in that interest. Boomer is also he's on Team Wiggins Ferry. So as part of his bridge plan, in doing this, he removes that idea of it being right here, and he puts his bridge over here. So it wouldn't need a tunnel, right? So if Boomer had won this war, it would have been over here, because he was not going to disrupt the Wiggins. So all of this, again, these two factions are going at it, and then it all comes together with a legislative situation in Illinois, and Eads and his team go to Illinois, and the whole thing ends up with Eads in charge of the St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company that's going to put a bridge right here. It's going to need a tunnel. Boomer gets in charge of the Illinois and St. Louis Bridge Company, which he creates, that wants to put a bridge right here. Eads just assumes he's going to win. Like, he just gets to work. He starts digging in the dirt. Like, they start building the bridge before it's even approved at the foot of Washington Avenue. And he was correct. He did his bid, and his plan won out. All right, that's where we're leaving the bridge. We're leaving all that topic. But it was really important, I think, to set up the bridge could have been in other places, and it really tied into these personal causes and legislative issues. This why it landed right where it was. And the tunnel was always going to be part of it if it landed there. All right, so now we have almost the same view, but now with the bridge. We have the bridge, and it's disappearing into the city. So like I said, from the beginning, the bridge is part of the construction, and that's in the 1860s. They did not even send the project for the tunnel to bid until 1872. The bridge was almost fully built before they even got to the tunnel part. So the bridge is being built. They'll deal with the tunnel later, they're saying. The idea for the tunnel is not just to preserve St. Louis, which it is. It's going to take trains under the city. It's going to curve, and it's going to take them over here to the south, to the Mill Creek Valley, not the neighborhood, but this area where the Mill Creek was backed up, this low area for rail yards. It's going to bring them over here, and that's where they're going to connect to the trains going westward or vice versa. And there's also a third piece, which they had hoped for a Union Depot over here. If they got all their wishes, they were going to get a bridge, a tunnel, and a depot. So that's the idea of the tunnel being there. And so the bridge is built. We've moved on. 1872. It's time for the tunnel. Hopefully this story gets good here. All right, so 1872, the first ad in the paper shows up. So 1872 describes the original route. It's going to go under Washington to 6th Street, and then to 8th, and then to Clark. Right, so it's going to curve not too far after it gets across the river. It's going to curve underneath the city. Eads had to, negotiate with all those landowners, all those buildings it was going to go under. They had to they had to work with every single property owner to make sure it was okay that they were going to be blasting stuff away and digging at the foundations of all these buildings. Eads had originally just planned for another company to build and operate the tunnel. That's why he wasn't too worried about it. He's like, someone else will do this part. And he had just assumed that the Pennsylvania Railroad, who was doing a very similar project at that time on the East Coast, he's like, well, let's have them do it. They've done this. That project was a huge mess for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and they quickly passed on the opportunity to lose more money in St. Louis. So in 1872, they were offered the project. They said, no, thank you. So the St. Louis and Illinois Bridge Company then has to scramble to figure something out. And so what happens is, and we've got this great other description here of, as the bridge approached its completion, public attention turned naturally to the tunnel, which is to connect with the Union Depot. The contracts will be awarded and work began immediately. What's behind that ad is that second post is Eads finding out that he's not getting the Pennsylvania Railroad. So he's got to scramble. He's got to figure something out and get someone local to build the bridge. And so he announces publicly, hey, bids are due next week, basically. Bids are due to get this tunnel built. I also want to note the very end of this little thing here, because it's the beginning. The Great Bridge approaches completion. They're going to do this. The contracts would be awarded and work begins immediately, delaying long enough to allow people to get their fall overcoats and clothing from the magnificent stock just opened at Tickner and Company. Like there's this whole second ad to that newspaper. Tickner stays in the story for a long time, trying to sell coats along with the tunnel being built. It's a very interesting marketing moment. So the entire story of the bridge can get bogged down, and the tunnel can get bogged down in these financial maneuverings, which really are, again, Eads' brilliance is this financial stuff. So he scrambles in 1872 to get someone else to do this. Can't find someone else to do it. He gets signatures from E.D. Morgan and J.P. Morgan, like famous J.P. Morgan money, right? Money. He gets signatures on a letter from them saying that they will finance whatever he figures out. Ultimately, they are going to offer him a loan of 100,000 pounds sterling on notes that they issue in New York, and it has to be paid back at 12% interest payable. But this goes on and on. So in studying all of this, you get really bogged down into these financial terms that Eads is juggling on all of these projects. So he gets the financing somewhat in place, and he decides not to fold it into the bridge project. He keeps the bridge separate and creates a second company, the St. Louis Tunnel Company. And the tunnel company, they do it that way so that they can charge rent on the rail lines. So when people actually use the tunnel, they can charge them money to do it in tolls, separate from the bridge, which is kind of weird. If you've paid money to cross the tunnel, or if you've paid money to cross the bridge, you're going to pay extra money to go through the tunnel. Okay. So Eads immediately leaves the country to go get more financing for this project that he now has to do. Project gets awarded to Williams Grenke Company, and this is one that's still a company that's still around in St. Louis. You still see this name. It's awarded for $788,000. Work gets started in October. Eads had originally estimated, as it says in the little article, Eads says this is going to be $1 million. And then the construction company says, we can get it done for $788,000. Incorrect. But so they get the job. They relinquish the job in April of the next year. So they get started, they get working on it. It is too hard of a project, and they actually give their contract up. And it goes to another firm, a man named James Andrews from Pennsylvania. All right, so we got some cool drawings. Luckily, someone took we don't have photographs of it being built, but we do have two really nice drawings in our collection of the tunnel being built. So what you're seeing here is, tells you on Spruce Street here. So basically the Metrolink, where the Metrolink station is now, you're looking into it. You can see how that construction is happening there. So part of the tunnel's project is they had to approve where it's going to go, and the city had approved that original route, under 6th, under 8th, we're going to come out at Clark. But as they start tunneling, they quickly realize they're tunneling into quicksand and springs and all kinds of stuff under, the geological story of St. Louis is always fun. They're tunneling into all of these different challenges, and they stop the project. And they're like, we can't continue this way. So after negotiating contracts with all those real estate properties, they had to start over and come up with a new route. So they come up with this, they had to apply it to the city to come up with an ordinance approving the new route. And again, this is like just a couple of years before the bridge opens. So we're at the crunch time at the end of the project. And it gets dramatic here. Because when they apply for that city ordinance and everything's like hanging on the wire, the city, who had some really interesting political situations at the time, they apply for the new route, and the city just sits on it. They don't reply. They don't approve it for weeks, getting close to 2 months. It just so happens that the president of the city council at the time was on Wiggins Ferry's board. And he did not mind if that project got stalled. And then one day a man shows up at the bridge company's office, the official record doesn't say who the man was, they say a man. A man shows up at the bridge company's office, demands several $1,000s to get it to move through the council. So the board president, who we're going to talk about in a minute, the board president quickly calls together a meeting of everyone, and they all come, he's like, we got to get together, we got to figure this out, we have to get this thing approved. And one of the members stands up adjourns the meeting, instructs the secretary to not take any notes going forward. Everyone leaves except the board president and him. He hands him the money and says, just get it done. Like they bow to the blackmail. And they didn't put it in the official record. That story comes from the board president's son's autobiography. So yeah, pretty interesting little moment there. And in addition to the city council president being on Team Wiggins, the mayor at the time, Joseph Brown, was actively working on his own bridge at Carondelet. So he also didn't want this tunnel to get built. It's all very St. Louis, right? It's all very, very mixed up and very not moving forward in progress with all these different interests. All right, so things are get going. We're back on track. We have our new routes. We're going to go up to 8th and 9th, and we're going to curve, and now it's an even better idea because we're going to go past the new post office, which to us is the old post office. We're going to go past that. Now we can take mail to the post. This is even better. It's all worked out. It all worked out, except for they get started and the ground freezes solid because now it's wintertime. They find more springs, and the businesses that are affected by that route, they start suing. And they start winning. So they're just bleeding money on this project, trying to get it pushed through the city. And it's not an easy project. In 1873, they have 200 feet of the stone, as they're moving along. In 1873, 200 feet of the wall collapses. And there was a big rainstorm. It's always Mother Nature playing hardball here in St. Louis. So they have this huge, and this is another sketch of the construction happening, and this is how they would do it. So they'd open up the street. They would have this, thing that can lower the people in and out, and remove the dirt and all the stuff. And then they would have a bridge built across the street for people which people did fall off that bridge. And in reading through this, there were a couple of trips and falls off of the bridges and into the holes. So it's not an easy project. This 200 feet wall. And then there was 28 feet of water that was behind the wall, which is what caused it to fix. In 1874, so right before everything, they're still finishing, there was a serious break in the completed tunnel at Washington Avenue and 6th Street. They were able to repair it, rebuild the wall, and rebuild the arches and keep moving. So it's not an easy project. In April, a month before the tunnel was technically supposed to be done, they had a strike. Everyone that was working on it. In June, there were multiple accidents, including a death. And the one that included a death, they had a separate accident that same day. Like it was a really rough day at the tunnel. And there's a note in, C.W. Woodward is the guy that wrote the definitive, although very biased, but definitive history of the project. And he has a quote in there. He says, notwithstanding that so many men were employed, there was such a large amount of work, there were comparatively a few fatal casualties, which really speaks to work in the 1860s and 70s. It's like, get the job done, people are going to die. They're like, it's just like part of the project. So here's some of the numbers for the tunnel project. So here we get to a nice cross-cut drawing of the tunnel with its two arches. Here's some of the fun facts on it. There are 215,000 cubic yards of dirt that had to be removed. There were 50,000 cubic yards of stone masonry. That's a lot. 13 million bricks were used in creating the arches and the tunnel itself. The whole length is 4,880 feet, and it's almost a mile in length. There are two tunnels, so if you've ridden on Metrolink underneath downtown St. Louis, you know that it's the two tunnels, the two arches, and that has two purposes. One, you can't collide with another train if you're in two different paths, and the other thing is that it creates strength to the street above it, because the street above it's going to have all, the street and the traffic and all the people coming and going, so this protects the tunnel as well. So all interesting stuff. And it also shows there's a little bit of arching here at the grade of the street. So here's the sidewalks, and then the street is going to grade up just a little bit over that. So one of the other very important details of the construction of the tunnel something that doesn't get talked about very much is it had to be ventilated because these trains were going to be belching smoke, right? And you couldn't just contain all that stuff in there. So they had to come up with a ventilation system. Initially, they did not come up with a ventilation system. Eads said, we will just come up with smokeless locomotives. And the smokeless locomotives will attach, stuff comes across the bridge, it'll attach it and pull it through the tunnel with no smoke. That was not an option. They did not have the money for that technology at the time. So they have to come up with a way to ventilate this tunnel. This is really impressive. They had originally four ventilation shafts. That was not enough. Once trains started going through it, it was just full of smoke, and it was unhealthy. It was hard on the people driving the trains. Any passengers on those trains were breathing in that smoke, and their clothes were covered. So they had the four ventilation shafts, and so then they decided to do this mechanical solution, and this was just to the west of the bridge on Washington Avenue. Look how high up, right? It's going up 6 stories, 7 stories. There's this huge ventilation shaft that's rising up above the city. So it was a circular ventilation shaft, 37 feet in diameter, which is as big as the River des Peres tunnels. And it was 15 feet at the top, and it was 130 feet tall. This would have been you would have seen this, right, in downtown. It had a fan that operated 24/7, cleaning out the air in the tunnel. Eventually, it was put out of use and completely removed, and we have it's gone from the built environment here in St. Louis. Another issue with ventilation is that really cool plan to stop at the post office. It stops immediately. Once everything's in place, a train comes through that goes to the post office and then belches smoke all in the post office and covers all the mail on the main floor. So they realize that's a bad idea, and they brick it up, and they never use that station. So there's like this cool, and it's an iron, like these cool iron, it probably looked really neat, and it's hiding somewhere under St. Louis. It's along the path, but it's dark when you're coming through there, so you can't see it. But they had a landing, and it was supposed to take the mail there. So what they had to end up doing was making an Eads Bridge station for the post office, and then taking it to the post office with horse and wagon. And then from that post office, they would send it off in the pneumatic tubes. It's another talk, pneumatic tubes, that we can talk about someday. So to get this whole thing done, we're going to let this guy have a moment, because Eads always gets all the credit, but for the tunnel, and really for the bridge too, this man should get so much credit. And this is William Taussig. And William Taussig is one of those people in St. Louis history that is always off to the side of everybody else's big moment, getting it done. Like, he's behind the scenes and getting stuff done. He was born in Prague, so he's an immigrant here to St. Louis. He was the first mayor of Carondelet. He, during the 1849 cholera epidemic, he worked directly with sick patients when most doctors were leaving. He's working with the patients at the quarantine station. In 1855, he was on that Gasconade train, the train going across the Gasconade River that collapsed, killing, over 55 people. He's on that train and loses the person that was sitting next to him, dies, but he himself is injured, but he goes to work immediately rescuing people out of the water and leads the efforts on how to get the train back to St. Louis. That story is horrific, but then you also think about, well, how did they even get back? How did you let someone know this happened without any kind of way to communicate? And then you've got a train that's half in the water. How do you get it back to St. Louis? So he's doing that on the ground. So he's a hero in so many stories. He personally paid for a militia during the Civil War to protect the city. And he went on a rescue mission when the Confederate, not troops, but members of the Confederate Army went to the state mental health facility and released all of the patients into the woods and into the surrounding area where they were. And so he finds out about it, organizes a group here in St. Louis, and they go to rescue those people without military cover. Like, it's a very dangerous mission, and he heads out and does it. But then, with all that stuff, he gets appointed by James Eads to be the president of this whole project. So he's the guy at the desk every day, pushing the paper, getting the stuff done whenever anything starts to fall apart. And for the tunnel, he's the guy that has to deal with that blackmail. And he's the one that is, when things fall through, he is at the desk having to get it done. And he's responsible for managing all of the project's finances, all of the administrative aspects of hiring people, getting rid of whatever's going on. He ensures there's money there when Eads finds it, and all of the logistics. So William Taussig, the unsung hero of the Eads Bridge and the tunnel. And there's also all of these legal challenges and things that he has to deal with. All right, so we get our tunnel built-ish, mostly, when the bridge opens. This is a really great painting from the St. Louis Art Museum of the opening of the bridge. At first glance, this looks like the city burning down in 1849. It is not. This is the opening of the Eads Bridge, and we have fireworks going, and we've got steamboats, which is an interesting thing. Steamboats are going, and this is the big celebration. The tunnel is not done when they have the opening ceremony. So they have a long train full of dignitaries that they take across the bridge, and they park them in the tunnel. And it just has to sit there. And the people that are on that tunnel are breathing in that smoke, and they're getting headaches, and they're getting sick, and they're just having to wait in the tunnel until it's clear to leave. Until there's not enough people watching anymore, they pull the train back out of the tunnel, and then they finish it a few weeks later. So that's that guy. Here we have the beautiful 1875 map of St. Louis, and I love showing this picture. Can anybody find the tunnel? So right here. So what you're looking at right there is the Metrolink station outside Busch Stadium. This is Busch Stadium, all right here. And this is that platform, those arches, it's all right there. Looks exactly like that now. Not exactly, but The change in elevation is there. I've got a picture right now of looking into those tunnels. So in more modern times, Metrolink, the Metrolink project that happens in the late 20th century, and they rehab the bridge. They also rehab the tunnels. The big part of the tunnel rehab, though, has been in more recent years. There was one from 1991 to 93 where they did some work on the tunnels, and then right now they're actually still working down, updating some of the supports and structures and the stations that are underground in downtown St. Louis. And then so there's a picture from the 8th and Pine station looking into those tunnels, into Eads' tunnels. And then, like I said, and this 8th and Pine station has been closed, or was closed for the last couple of years while they updated and worked on the structures there, and it's back open. And then this is looking in from the Metrolink station at Busch Stadium. So all of those things have expanded the lifespan of the tunnel for another 50 years is the thought there. Then when they did the renovations on the bridge, they assumed they expanded the life to 2091, which is a very specific year. But 2091, and then this is supposed to be also going out that far as well. Although I guess not as far. They're only saying 50 years. It's not as long. But those are the original tunnel. When you're on Metrolink, the biggest takeaway, when you're on Metrolink, you were on the tunnels that were part of the Eads Bridge project, and they had their own challenges, and they had their own drama and intrigue, and they were not a given, and they were a very stressful part of the project for everyone involved. And they were part of the ingenuity because the whole reason that they approved, even though Homer said, this idea is great because it's going to screw with the ferries, the people that approved it said, no, it's a great idea because you can't go into the city over here. And they thought they had killed the whole project. When Eads and his team was like, no, we'll just do a tunnel. We solved this problem that they thought was unsolvable. Thank you very much.